Why would I wear pants? What are you kidding? Oh dear. No, no, no. That's how's it going, guys? Thanks for coming back, and it's good to see you again this afternoon. And welcome to everybody who's here from Bob and Globe Busters. What kind of sorcery is this, lad? I don't know. It's magic, don't you know? Hey, Bob. Kevlar 7, Raven Wolf. Hey, I'm still working on that interview that we had, and it was terrific. And so I keep wanting to get it done, and it turns into more effort than I had initially imagined. So we'll get it worked out, I promise. It's because you guys don't want to miss it. It was actually a really terrific conversation I had with 7 Raven Wolf, and I know that Red Wolf did one as well, like, copycat. No, I was kidding. We both just kind of zeroed in on the same thing at the same time. That seems to happen quite a bit, actually, that we, all of us looking for truth, there's synchronicities everywhere. We start looking at the same things at the same time. It's remarkable how that works. So, hey, Joe Ray, welcome back. Reperception, and Janet Gunther, Sue Finelli, longtime friend of mine since she started following Crow. We've been friends. And Marky Rowe has been here since early on. Trey Clark, hey, dude, thank you so much, man. That's just awesome of you. Thank you. Well, here we are again. It's Sunday afternoon, and this is kind of the point 5 episode of Sola Scriptura. This is the one where Wayne doesn't join us. Slacker. No. He said from the outset he could only do every other week, and that's super great. And it gives us a chance to kind of hang out together and sort of revisit what we did last time, and kind of look ahead and answer any questions you guys have. Hopefully, I'll keep my eyes a little bit better on the chat today. Well, during the unintended consequences episodes, it's really difficult to do that because I'm kind of shuffling a bunch of things. And here it's a little bit more relaxed. Kind of take our time and look into the nature of what we got going on here. So there's just some wacky stuff happening. All right, so let's see if I can come over here. Let's see if you guys can see that. So we were taking a look. We've been going through the book of Genesis, have Wayne and I, and taking a look at the historical evidence, or at least the story as it's told in the Bible. Now we are again looking at external sources. Book of Enoch shows up certainly, and even looking through other traditions, including the Bhagavad Gita, and today we'll talk a little bit about the legend of Gilgamesh and some others as we begin to look at. We got to the time period, and this is a very interesting one. And again, Wayne and I could hang out all day on just this first few verses of Genesis 6, where some very interesting things happen. And this is where we get, there's very little information in here. In the book of Enoch, it goes into a much deeper story. And I'm sure Wayne and I will cover that. I kind of held off. I wanted to cover that with him because it is so full of very interesting stuff that mostly, if you grew up around church and you didn't spend any time in Sunday, or even I was going to say, if you spent any time in Sunday school, you probably wouldn't have heard many of these stories at all. Stories of the Watchers and a group of angels given by name who came and made of themselves human wives. And there's some question about that within the Christian tradition, of course, is that Jesus said that angels neither marry nor give in marriage, the implication there being that they are sort of genderless or whatever. But it does refer to many of the angels by names, and mostly masculine names. However, it does say specifically that they interbred somehow with women, and that could have been through a genetic thing. It could have been that they manifested physically in a certain way that included all the wedding tackle to do the work. We don't really know. It doesn't exactly say, but it does say that they made wives, and so it appears that they were of a masculine bent in that they wanted the women instead of the men, although there was all kinds of craziness going on in a variety of different ways. But what we end up with is this interesting word, the Nephilim. Verse 4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men and gave birth to them. These were the mighty men of old, men of renown. And this has led many, including myself, to at least propose the idea that these are their offspring were the original of the demigods. What we hear in terms of the Roman and Greek pantheon of gods and demigods, many of them again were half human and half god, and we could assume that they would have used the the phrase "little God" with a little g, right, for these beings that manifested into the flesh. So it's a very interesting time. It says these again were the mighty men of old, men of renown, and that certainly leads us to know that there were stories told about them. If we look at a different version here in the Message. Again, the Message is kind of a paraphrase, so it's not a super study version, but it is an interesting way to look at it. Hey, Lee Scullard, welcome. So it says again, when the human race began to increase with more and more daughters being born, the sons of God noticed that the daughters of men were beautiful. They looked them over and picked out some wives for themselves. Then God said, I'm not going to breathe life into men and women endlessly. Eventually, they're going to die. From now on, they can expect a lifespan of 120 years. Well, see, again, that didn't happen until after the deluge, after the flood. And the timeline we are here is talks of, we haven't even gotten to Noah yet, right? You could see that right underneath there. So interesting that that would be what caused it, is the flood. Something happened during and after the flood that caused the lifespan of man and presumably all creatures on earth to begin to be much shorter and less vigorous. Again, this was back in the days and also later when there were giants in the land. The giants came from the union of the sons of God and the daughters of men. These were the mighty men of ancient lore, the famous ones, and that's how they put it there. Interesting to note again that if we take a look in the King James Version or one of the older versions, we'll take a look here at the King James. It says that there were giants in the earth in those days and also after that, when the sons of God came into daughters of men. So presumably it happened again. There's some contentions about that. People, interestingly enough, do get very butthurt about what they think they read in Scripture and not, and they make it part of dogma and canon law and that sort of things, and even down to the nitpicky letter and little jots and tittles and whatnot. And I don't know, man. My experience with that is certainly not that nitpicky. I agree that it's good to be obedient to Dad and do what he asks, but in a way of beating up other people for what you think, well, certainly we see that it doesn't matter about religion. It's just the nature of people, right? It's the same thing we see with mask holes, right? They're going to tell us how to do what we need to do because they're doing it, and then as soon as they get a chance, they don't do it either because, all the ways of a man are clean in his own eyes. All right. So, again, some very interesting passages here in the book of Genesis, the early stuff. And again, as Wayne and I were remarking last week, and I have before, that we're given so little information from which to draw. I mean, there's enough there to kind of get the thumbnail sketch of it, and again, these little puzzle pieces that we look at. But it's really, really difficult to put down your foot and say with any certainty, this is the way of this and this is the way of that. And it is this, along with, certainly people who talk about what happens to you, after you shuffle off this mortal coil, that I often say, again, absolute certainty is the imminent domain of frauds and fools, because there's just nobody here who knows, and it's difficult to prove these things. You can theorize all you want, and that's good. I don't have any problem with hypothesizing and spitballing and saying, I think this is the way things are, and for me, show evidence of that. Give me some reason to join in and to think that. And I come to my conclusions. I wouldn't even say conclusions because that sort of implies the end of the matter, right? It's concluded. I just say I come to my positions based on the evidence at hand. And if there is other evidence that comes to light, then I'm happy to take a look at that, right, and evaluate it. And over time, it may cause my viewpoints to change. It may not. It may I may find it preposterous, and it just confirms what I already thought. Those things happen. But I think having, again, an open mind and being able to at least evaluate a variety of sources of information is a better way to go. Again, that's my opinion. You can do with that as you will. You can wipe your butt with it. I don't care. It's not my place again to tell anybody what to do or how to perceive these things. I'm just sharing with you my thoughts and views. And if you find them valuable, great. I love that. Right. I feel like I've done some good, and that's the whole point. I think in me doing at least this session is to again offer my viewpoints, and I hope that people find it helpful. And for those who don't, I'm sure there's other things you can find interest in. Right? I have been thankfully mostly troll free. There are people again who get they have opposing viewpoints, which it's fine. That's super great. But I don't need to know about it. I mean, I don't want to argue about it, or I'm not trying to defend my position or challenge anybody else, or again, put my foot down and go, this is the way it is, and you got to believe that. Come on, man, that's nonsense. I'm just sharing again my views and how I see it, and I think some of it's very interesting. And again, I encourage people to have their own relationship with the Creator. I believe that's possible, primarily because I have, and I identify that person as the Creator. They identify themselves as the Creator, and I have every indication to believe that they are, especially since it's unlike any other being I've ever met, and it does not match with the idea of it being my own ego bounced off the inside of my head, because I'm simply not that smart or good as is this person, or creative or powerful, and has the ability to apparently intervene in everyday life, as has happened to me on numerous occasions, which I would only say is miraculous, right? Just he showed up and intervened and did things that I didn't know. So, Jam, off topic, but putting it in here, does the Bible say anything about how different languages came about? Yeah, it does. After the deluge, let's see. Let's see if I can just. It's at the Tower of Babel. And should have been in Genesis. Yeah. So in Genesis 11, and we'll get there. So after the flood, there was one of those men of renown, Gilgamesh, or rather Nimrod, who decided he wanted to build a tower, and so he said that they would build this mighty tower, and even in some legends that they thought they were going to go and attack and kill God. That's how some of the stories read. But in the whole of the earth, this is Genesis chapter 11, in the whole of the earth there was one language and one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said to one another, go, let us make some brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime they had for mortar. And they said, let us build a city and a tower, whose top may reach up to heaven. And let us make a name, lest we be scattered across the face of the earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men build. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. Now nothing could be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. So let us go down and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build the city. And therefore the name is called Babel, because the Lord did confound the language of all the earth. And from thence the Lord did scatter them across the face of the earth. In many of the traditions, he made 70, or some say 72 languages at that time. All I know is that the idea of, again, a creator that could just reach in and in one moment smack people's brains in such a way that, again, some of them could understand each other, and they separated into groups. And so into groups, they didn't just mess them up where they couldn't speak. They could only communicate with presumably people of their family, of their tribe, have the kind of power and intellect to be able to do that in a single moment is, remarkable and mind-blowing to me. I'm sure that there are many who would just say, well, it's a metaphor. What happened is people separated and their languages begin to change. Yeah, okay. But there is, again, a number of indications that reveal these stories are consistent, right? Well, Marky, thank you very much. I'm glad to do it too. Let's see, that clicks with the Bach saga about how etymology is similar to the language of thousands of miles apart. Yeah, I mean, there are different stories of this. And so, like, for example, when it comes to Bach Saga, there are different versions of these things. And I have seen the movie Zeitgeist, right, which I find to be, I think, very misleading, and that they're taking stories and flipping them over to say that, oh, these stories were older and therefore this comes from this and this shit. In fact, I was going to show you that, and because the next time we're going to talk about the flood. And so when we get into the flood, if you look up Wikipedia, they say that there's a flood myth, right? So let's see here. Let me get this more on screen so you can kind of take a look at that. All right. So the flood myth, and so they're calling it's a myth. It's a deluge myth in which there's a great flood, usually sent by a deity or deities, which destroys civilization, often in an act of divine retribution. Parallels are often drawn between the flood waters of these myths and the primeval waters which appear in certain creation myths, as the flood waters are described as a measure for the cleansing of humanity. And then so we have a variety of these. We have of course, the story of Noah and the flood, in the Mesopotamian flood stories, Prala in Hinduism, the Ganyu in Chinese mythology, the Kalion and Purana or Pirna in Greek mythology, the Genesis flood narrative, Belgamir in Norse mythology, Cessair in I'm probably just brutalizing that, Cessair in Irish mythology, and the Quiche and Maya peoples. So we've got dozens of them, right? We have dozens of these stories, and they're all very similar. And so what again, the easiest way to imagine this, if you apply Occam's razor, is that there is one story that was retold by several different people over time, and that story began to change a little bit, the old playing of telephone, and so it changed with each of these stories ever so slightly. So here we go again. Here we flip the narrative over and say, although the story of Noah in the Hebrew Bible is the most well-known flood myth of the Western culture, it shows the influence of earlier narratives from Mesopotamia. So this idea that they stole from other things and made up a story based on another made-up story, it seems far more likely, especially with the evidence that we see at hand with these megaliths and stuff, and the trade and civilizations gone, as well as the story of Atlantis disappearing beneath the water. It would makes far more sense that it actually happened, and people are telling the story of something that is ingrained deep within the human memory. But here we have the mainstream view, which is a few localized stories that kind of got put together, and it's a metaphor for the cleansing of humanity and how people just wanted to struggle for survival. No shit, that's really what they say. That we have here the Genesis flood narrative. So it's a flood myth found in the Tonka, right, which is the Pentateuch, the book of Genesis. Story tells of God's decision to destroy the earth, and it's a pseudoscientific attempt to argue. Basically, it tries to say they do everything they can to dismiss it, and there is such a hatred for scriptural narrative, and yet all the evidence points to the Bible being, mostly right in its history, in the layout of things and how things occurred. It seems mostly right. I find it humorous, and I have even since being a kid, how often they will step on their own dick, trying to dismiss it, and then they go, "Oops, yeah, we found. No, that's wrong." As they explain that these things were, just silly myths, and it turns out, oh shit, that's actually true. Damn it. Okay, let's try again. It's pretty funny to me how hard they work to try to dismiss this, and once you get an idea of the fact that they've lied about everything. It becomes much easier to see that every time they tell you, don't look there, that's silly. That's a dumb place to look. That's a great place. That's your big red flag. Go look in there. It paints a target on it for me. Every time they say, no, don't look over there. And so for me, when they, the mainstream narrative points at anything to say, that's silly, right? You shouldn't look there. I'm going to look. And even when it comes to what many, again, of the Christian tradition get really scared about when it comes to astrology, astrotheology, taking a look at the tarot, that sort of stuff, people get, chi, the idea of that. Some people get really butthurt and really afraid of it. And I understand being cautious of things. I mentioned this morning about a listener who was talking about a friend who wanted them to get into the Ouija board, right? I'm saying from my own experience as well as others who I've talked to directly, they've had very negative experiences with that. And not that it's not real, but it absolutely is. And it's dangerous. You're opening doorways that you probably, everyone had regret for it. I'll just say that I have ever talked to. How about a cock joke? The poppycock, big, huge, throbbing poppycock on Tuesday and Thursday mornings with Rose 777. Gonna make Gravy Jesus jealous. No, I love Rose and Jason. They're awesome. And if you haven't shown up for that, I think most people here regulars there as well with Rose 777, and we do the Poppycock Report, just taking a look at the craziness that goes on around us, especially the stories they try to sell us in the news. And here's an interesting thing. I mentioned this on Wednesday on Secrets of Saturn with Gravy Jesus, that's Jason Lindgren, and Wayne McCroy, and Crow 777, and we talked about this idea of manifesting things. So there was a couple of things we wanted to do. One of them is to consider something and get everybody together and to manifest a specific idea. But the other one is to, on a certain date that rhymes with Pep Timber Kablevin, the day after the 10th of September, but perhaps even around that as well, is to photograph your television. And if you don't have one, good for you. If you do, we were thinking about perhaps news reports, that sort of thing, but anything that you get an inspiration. Taking some shots. We're trying to capture subliminal images catch in mid-frame. And I've been doing just a quick little look on how to write that up, because depending on the frame rate and the refresh rate of your television, then you want the aperture to open and close. You want the picture rate to be able to be within that, right? So in other words, if it's an older TV, standard was 30 frames per second. And so the backwards of that is, if you want to not catch the flicker or not catch in between frames, then what you would do is set it at 15, within a 15th of a second, so that you would catch at least 2 full refreshes to catch that. And then, but we're going to do the opposite. We want to catch those in between frames and see what happens. But one of the things that I had mentioned is that I did an Ngram search on the usage of the word poppycock. And of course, it was a word that was fairly popular in the 1800s and kind of died off. And it suddenly had a major resurgence in terms of usage right around 2014, a little bit after. And as a result, again, it's a word that's barely been used, and all of a sudden we're starting to see it show up. It's a word that we kind of joke around because Crow 777 used it as a funny take on, instead of saying bullshit, you would say poppycock. And so we just began the Poppycock Report, and all of a sudden I'm seeing it appear in the last 6 weeks. I've seen it appear in like 24 mainstream news articles as the headline. And then somebody sent me today a clip from somebody's sermon, and they mentioned unintended consequences. It's a phrase that I've been using for a while, but certainly the name of this channel. So it's interesting how we begin to kind of manifest those things. And so, this idea being that we want to manifest love and goodwill out into the world, right? And so to be able to do that, but yeah, we get back to this idea that anything that they're telling you is, again, probably upside down and backwards. We see this all the time. I just saw in the chat here. So Jam says, in my experience, God speaks to me through different things. Tarot cards always tell me the truth. It's a family thing. And the advice is always on point, and my intention is always to connect to God. See, again, I don't have any problem with that. I know there are Christians who get really butthurt about it. I think I've said this before. My thoughts on that is that I think there's a reason that the tarot cards and the I Ching and casting dice and that sort of thing actually works, because there's this interconnectedness of all things. And if you get skilled at seeing the push and pull and seeing how those, let's say, the ripples go across the pond, then you can catch some insight into those things. And there's a variety of different ways to do that. I think the danger in any of those divination things lies in that you're so seeking the answer that you're willing to take information regardless of its source. And it's easy to they're from, again, my view, because I've had experience with both, that there are intelligent, very intelligent beings that are outside of our regular perception, and they're very interested in what we do for whatever reason. I have my thoughts on it, but for whatever reason, they're very interested in what we do, and they like to influence that. And especially the malevolent ones often are tricksters, right? And they want to play with us. And so if you're looking for just information, and you're doing that sort of in an occultic way, you can open the door in the same way of using a Ouija board. You can inadvertently open the door to things that you'd rather not be dealing with. Now, again, does that mean you're absolutely gonna? No, I'm just saying that those who use it for that for a purpose without the understanding, again, without the intention to connect to the Creator, if you're just looking for answers, there's certainly going to be someone willing to give you answers, and it may not be who you want knocking at your door. All right, so anyway, we'll do that. So anyway, that's my comment there. Again, I have no problem with it. I have looked at it again. I think there are reasons why it works. So I do think it does work. I'm just always cautious of the source of the material, and so generally for me, I find that. For the most part, when I ask Dad for information, either he'll give me bits and pieces of information enough that I need to know, or he'll tell me it's not business. And that often works too. It is none of my business. But it keeps me focused on, again, for me, the focus is becoming the person that I need to be. Right, it's that is the primary focus of my relationship with Dad, is that he's changing my heart to be hopefully more like his and more in tune with projecting love onto other people, or passing it on to them, and become a conduit, a gateway, if you will, a wire, a connection to him, and to pass that to people that otherwise wouldn't get it. What's the least grabbled Bible to start with? Man, great question. Because I don't know that there's any of them that are totally ungrabbled. But again, my take is it's an invitation, and so they all are going to have at least some, probably a good portion of good stuff, an open invitation to come into relationship with the Creator. If you can manage reading it, I think the Geneva version is, again, an older one, and even it goes before the King James. But the King James, again, it's a little bit of a difficult read in that we don't speak that way anymore. So NIV is okay in terms of that. Yeah, see, Jam, that's a great answer. Again, I don't dismiss it. That's my take. I don't dismiss those sources. Again, my thing is always just for anybody, be cautious, right? Always consider the source. I would say that the same for any information, right? Always consider the source of the information, and then again, just use good discernment and evaluate it. Right, as I say, my litmus test is if love is not the motive, then God is not involved. What's thoughts on the Colburn Bible? I don't know if I'm familiar with that specific version. I know quite a bit of them. Is there something I need to know here? Do I see it in this? I don't see it in this list. And this is kind of the standard list that I work with. There's one with the Strong's Concordance that I use quite a bit. I don't really, again, Good News Translation is kind of a floofy one. It was done in the 70s, kind of like a paraphrase Bible to try to put it into more modern English. The NIV, New International Version, is pretty close to the original in a modern way. But I think all of them, I see evidence of at least mistranslation by misunderstanding, and certainly we don't have the same cultural context, so it's difficult to really understand what was being said, just because the things get lost in translation and idiom and that sort of thing. So it's a difficult thing, but I do again think that there's wisdom in all of it, and if your intention is to have better understanding and to find a connection to the Creator, I think you will find it. If your intention is to show where it's wrong, or grapple it, or disprove it, I think you're going to find that. You're going to find places where it is problematic, right? And or even from my view, people put their own interpretations on what God was doing, even within the Bible, even in the original text. They saw something, and they, through their belief system, sort of overlaid their ideas on top of it, and said, the Lord was wroth with this guy, and so he smote him. Like, really? Or did you just not like that guy and you were pleased when he died? I mean, sometimes it seems that way. And certainly I see that my and others' relationships with him, or with them, the Creator, is such that we're children, right? We have, I mean, how does an ant understand an architect, right? And what they're doing? We don't have a clue, really, of what is going on, other than what they tell us and how they interact with us. And so to try to interpret what they're doing and divine the thoughts of a Creator, it's, I think, very difficult. So, an exercise in both futility and frustration, as well as if somebody says they think they know, again, I would be very cautious of that. I mean, I can only, again, I speak from a place of saying this is my understanding, this is my relationship, and this is what I know within the context of that relationship, and I can explain it the best I can. And even in that, I know that I'm mistaken sometimes. I get the wrong idea. I've expressed before how he'll say, "Hey, go over there," and I'm like, "Oh, there's the mountain. I'm going to go climb the mountain." And halfway up the mountain, I'm cold and tired and bruised, and I'm like, "What am I doing?" He's like, "What are you doing on the mountain?" I didn't say climb the mountain. I said, "Go over there." I was trying to get you around the get you around the quicksand. What are you doing? Because you weren't listening, right? You got all excited and you thought you knew what was going on. That's happened to me numerous times, that I missed, the information was correct, but I misinterpreted what was coming. And I got my own ideas about it, right? And I think that's common to people. The trick is, from my perspective, to listen very closely and to develop that sense of discernment, even in that, to listen and understand who you're listening to and what the nature of the source is. And to, again, in Scripture it says, test all spirits. And I think that's excellent advice. We can't not have a relationship. I think there's some truth to that. I think some people have a bad relationship with their Creator, or they ignore or deny its existence. So yeah, I mean, I would say that there's some truth in that. They could, they have a bad relationship. I mean, how can you not have a relationship with your family, right? But again, my wife, for example, she had a very bad relationship with her family, to the point where she changed her name and moved, right, and hasn't been in contact with them for these many years, and which shocked me at first. I was like, holy shit, right? That's a bold move. But then understanding better, I think it's probably the right thing. I think she probably did the right thing. It would be difficult for me, and maybe something, I don't know. I should have done it, but there have been times when my relationship with my family was not healthy, and was harmful to me. But I certainly did step away from it, and that was for the better. So anyway, so would you say she doesn't have a relationship with her parents? Well, she doesn't have an ongoing relationship, but she certainly is related to them. So I think that's a fair metaphor. Cobra and Bible was originally penned in hieratic by Egyptian academics after the exodus of the Jews. It's original 21 volumes. I haven't read it. I haven't seen it, Sheila. So I'd have to take a look. Again, I'm always, even with the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? I'm a little bit skeptical. Of everything, right? One of the things I've come to find is, when you're talking about graveling, right? The Catholic Church certainly did their fair share of graveling, in that most of what we base the Scaligeриan timeline or Western history upon is a fraud, and demonstrably so. That the Jesuits, through the work of the Benedictine monks, basically invented and forged a shit ton of documents, and then hid them away, and then a couple hundred years later pulled them out and said, oh, they're 1,000 years old. It's nonsense, and they've been proven that 80+% of the documents that were said to be extant sources turn out not to be. And of course, their claim is, well, they're just copies of the original, but it's nonsense. They fabricated entire sections of history and then took over the world. Essentially, did the Jesuits as this educational and scientists, and they were smart, and yeah, they are master gravelers, that's for sure, like the professional gravelers, right? And took over everything, right? So when you take over the educational system of every country and in every location, then you control the narrative, and they totally did, and they changed it. They changed the narrative everywhere, including the nature of where we live, right? The Jesuits that did that, they did all of it. Now, are the Jesuits the they in they? Well, they're one of the they, right? Again, I think that if you go chasing your tail and trying to figure out who the they is, you're going to find it's an exercise in futility and frustration, because if you've heard of them, they're probably they're probably not the they, right? I mean, they're included. They're on the team. Certainly, we know that all these the Illuminati and the Zionists and the Jesuits and the Masons, they're all on board with this Luciferian idea. But are they near the top of the pyramid? I think they're all serving their part. Each of them probably thinks they're doing their best to do whatever they're doing, and some of them even think they're doing the right thing. But I think they are themselves deceived. But I think if you know who they is legion, that's for sure. And from my perspective, the they is, as you say, Seven Ravenwolf. I know you're saying minions, that those are the minions, but I think it's the fallen ones, the ones who have been here for a very long time, and for all intents and purposes, what we would see as being immortal, right? Those fallen beings from another dimension who are malevolent. They hate mankind, and their intention is to destroy us. And primarily because they hate the Creator, and the Creator loves us. And so in order to harm the Creator, the point is to hurt Him by hurting us, by killing us. That is the point. And it's a numbers game to them. They think that if the more they can steal away, that is winning. And in that sense, I think that they'll go to their end thinking they have won, in that sense, that they got more. Right, and Dad is the kind to always take, I think, quality over quantity, right? And so he looks at the qualitative aspects. It says the man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. Does the Bible mention reincarnation at all? It's a great question, Lee. It's one that I've struggled with, frankly, as I look at this thing, because traditional Christianity does not hold to reincarnation, and the reason for that, and I would say that according to the Bible, the way I read it indicates no, that there is not reincarnation. It pretty much gives enough indication to say that there's not. It said it is appointed once that man should die. And then he's basically got one shot here, and then thereafter is essentially goes into kind of a sleeping mode, depending on, again, which tradition. Some denominations or whatever, some views take soul sleep. That is, that they are literally unconscious and unaware of everything. Much of modern Christian tradition, again, based primarily on the teachings of the Catholic Church, teach that you immediately go to your ultimate reward. So after death, you immediately go either to heaven or to hell, and where you will stay for eternity. That is not what the Bible teaches, however. What the Bible teaches is actually very very obtuse. There's basically information in there that says that there is some awareness after you die, that there is what's called Abraham's bosom, or those who would go, for example, Valhalla, or paradise, kind of a nice place, sort of like this, what I was showing on the screen, just a lovely little place where you rest until, in kind of a dreamy state, until the ultimate judgment. And then there's the other place, Sheol, or hell, which is controlled by demons, and they are in torment as they wait. And this is according to a story told by Jesus. He tells the story of Lazarus and the rich man. And the rich man was rude to Lazarus, and Lazarus was a poor beggar. And the rich man saw him every day at the gate. Well, they both died. And at one point, the rich man, being in torment, looked over and saw Lazarus and said, "Hey, could you dip your finger in some water and put it on my tongue? I'm dying here." And he's like, "Can't do it. There's a gulf fixed between us." And so, then he says, "Well, can you at least go back and I've got 5 brothers. Go back and tell them to avoid this fate," right? Sort of like the Christmas Carol, right? So Jacob Marley comes back and says, "I'm trying to get you to avoid the fate, Ebenezer Scrooge." So he says that, and again, he is told that even if he were to send, the prophets back, that he had his chance. You had every opportunity to listen, and you did not. So Jesus also said, "Don't fear the one who can kill the body, but the body and the soul in hell." And in the book of Revelation, it describes that there's a judgment in which those who are have lived and are dead are judged according to their works and according to what they did with their life, and that some would be extinguished, and some would be in the presence of God as he remakes the place, and that there's a third group, and this is what I've come to recently read, that those who at the end accept the mark of the beast are thrown into the same place as are the demons, which would be apparently when, how I'm reading it, is when the whole thing is made new, they go into a nothing place, like the Tartarus, the void. And so it is sort of like at the beginning of, Superman, they put them in that little, infinite place, right? And so that is probably pretty close to what happens. Like, so for example, they grant them immortality by taking the mark of the beast. They get a kind of immortality, but the problem with that is that they stay aware when everything is destroyed and renewed, and they have no place to be because they don't belong there, and that is bad. So again, that's the scriptural story. Now, that having been said, I've often said I don't believe in reincarnation, and I didn't in my last life either. In that I've had some very interesting experiences that would seem to be best described as a reincarnation experience. Or remembering a past life. And there are lots of evidences of kids who have had very clear memories of either dying or a different life for which they would have no other way of knowing. Now, again, that having been said, I guess the ultimate answer is I don't really know. I could look at it both ways, but here's my take. I think that one of the ideas that's presented within the idea of reincarnation is that you are over and over, right, going through this process until you kind of work off karmic debt and then can achieve a sort of apotheosis. I find that to be inconsistent with what I understand of the nature of things and why we're here and how. From my perspective, right, is that just seems inconsistent. And so it does seem more consistent to me, the story that's told within Scripture, that is appointed once for man to die, that you're here once, and then all the other things that I mentioned. But that the reincarnation, the evidence that we have of it could just as easily be sort of tuning into that radio station, right, of the collective consciousness, and that these ideas do continue to exist out there, or echoes of it bounce off, that you can get very clear impressions. Because I will also say that I have had the same kind of very clear impressions of a memory or something like that, simply walking past somebody, and it wasn't mine. It was all, then as soon as I looked up and I saw the person, it was very clearly a memory or a thought that came from them, and I picked up on it, so like a radio, and so I tuned in on it for a moment. Well, that would be exactly the same as times of these other experiences, and there have been many that I have that might have been best expressed or described as reincarnation. But for myself, again, I just to me, it seems inconsistent with what I understand, not because I'm going with a belief system or a religion or dogma, even with the understanding that that's not what the Christian tradition teaches, but that's not why I have that view. It's just I have the view, some because of what I read in the Bible and elsewhere, and the nature of the the meaning that's applied to the reincarnation thought is that you're going to work for this yourself, and you're going to work off these karmic debts and learn to go through an apotheosis. And that is simply not my understanding of the way that we're created or how it works. Right, that the work is done, has already been done in Junior. Right, the first the first of all creation, that being the person of Jesus, and that because of the punishment of the original fallen one, being Lucifer, or the devil or whoever, because his ultimate punishment was death, and that is because by choosing to separate himself from the source of power, the ultimate result of that is death. And so, as a result of that, he's kind of like the legal mind, right? And so he then requires that everyone else suffer the same punishment. It wouldn't be fair for him to suffer it and not everybody else, right? So if you are in a place of rebellion against the Creator, then the punishment must be death. And that is why blood is required, that there must be punishment, there must be a death for this cause. And that is why there was sacrifice required, animal sacrifice, going all the way back. And it wasn't really, from my understanding, even though the Creator asked for it, it wasn't because he wanted it. It was because the enemy required it, that there had to have been blood shed for the cause of the rebellion. And so it was a proxy death. And that ultimately is what happened, and why there was the proxy death of Jesus, who took the punishment on himself. He died to death, but he was innocent of the crime, and he was not in rebellion. And then that gave the opportunity for anyone to claim that as their right, and in doing so, becoming in direct relationship again with the Father, as a clean slate. And that's how it works. And so there's no working toward it or becoming an apotheosis of self through that process. Again, this is my understanding of it, and I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes or, have any, I know people have different beliefs, and that's fine. I'm just explaining how I understand it, and this is the way that I read it. So there's that. Would I rethink the ending if I knew the end result? If we do the right things, does that mean that we did it right? Wow, that's a great question. I'd have to think about how you mean that in the context. Like, for example, if if you mean, like, for example, if I knew, the question is often asked, if Dad knew that Lucifer, for example, would fall, then what's the purpose in making him in the first place? And again, I think knowing it's going to happen and making it happen are not the same thing. So there's always the argument that evil was brought into the world by Lucifer, but that was done by God, and so God intended for there to be evil in the world, so that it's the only way that we can learn is through suffering and through having that choice. I don't think that's the only way we can learn. I think that's the state that we are in right now, and so it's an opportunity for us to see the difference between one and the other. It's a very clear contrast, but it had to be allowed to happen, and in part because this is part of the argument that I think the enemy has against Dad and his creation. Is that again? This is the core of the argument. Is if you give someone free will, and they choose not to follow you, and then the result is death. Is that not a punishment? And is that really free will at all? And the answer, of course, is ultimately that choosing to step away from perfection creates imperfection, and that is simply the natural result of the process. But by taking it as a punishment and saying that it's not fair, it's not right, it seems a good legal argument. But again, when you understand that when you separate from the source of power, that you're no longer connected to it, and therefore the ultimate result is going to be death. That is just a result, and so. Then why carry it out? Why let it continue to go to the end? And again, the answer, as I understand it, is that you have to let it continue to its ultimate progression in order to show it. If you were to nip it in the bud, right, then that question remains. Did you just shut him up because he had a valid argument, right? And it could leave that question open. And so this answers for all eternity the question of, is he good? And is he right? And is he just? And so ultimately that question will be answered when you look at the whole history of everything that went down, and you see that everything that he did was from a position of love and from a position of justice and mercy. and that truly the father of lies is the enemy, and he's the bloodthirsty one, not Dad, and that all the accusations leveled against Dad are false and incorrect and really a projection, just like we see from the people who they claim, oh, I'm wearing a mask, I'm doing it because I care about other people. Oh, you're not doing it? I hope you die. Right? So yeah, dark glasses. Again, that's again, I don't have any argument, or I won't try to convince anybody. I'm just saying this is the way I see it now, and I continue to be open to things. When I was younger, right in my 20s, I had grown up believing that all, for example, like ghosts, everything supernatural was a direct result of either positive or negative. I mean, that was kind of my experience too, because I've always been able to be sort of sensitive to things that the unseen and recognize presences when they show up, whether or not you can see them, and sometimes more visible than others. But my understanding was that those things that were not, well, I'll say that there was a time, I was probably, I'm trying to figure this out, 8 or 9 years old, when I was living in Puyallup, Washington. Is where we lived at the time. When we lived kind of out in the woods on South Hill. There wasn't much there at the time. And I was the only one in the house, and I opened the door to my bedroom. It's a fairly large house and long hallway, and so I opened the door to my bedroom, and I stood face to face with 3 Native Americans, and yet they were translucent. You can kind of see through them, so it was very clear that they were not there in physical form, but they were there, and they were, you could see their outfits and everything, and they were almost as shocked as I was, because I couldn't hear them, but I could very clearly tell what they were. They looked at each other in surprise, like, oh shit, he can see us. And they looked at me like very curious, like, what the hell, he can see us. And I looked at them kind of like, what the hell? And it wasn't scary. It was weird AF, but it wasn't really scary. And it just, it wasn't more than just a few seconds, maybe 20 or 30 seconds. It seemed like forever, a long time, but then they kind of vanished. And I thought, well, that was weird. But it wasn't particularly scary. And I had certainly other experiences with some very scary things. And then, but, as you get older, other things take hold. And so I was kind of the mind that, ghosts and that sort of stuff were probably bad. And then I was working at a studio in Texas, and weird things happen there all the time. Just weird, like we say, gremlins in the system. Stuff that shouldn't have happened did. Things not hooked up would work, and it was really, really bizarre. And so we kind of always talked about the gremlins in the system. And then one night I was working about 2:00 in the morning, working on a project, and I looked, and there was a closet to my left. And so it had been a house previously. It was an old house. It had been there since the late 1800s. It had been converted into a studio. And I just caught something out of the corner of my eye. I looked to the left, and as I looked, right in what was then a closet, storing tape, I looked in there, and there was a little girl, 10 or 11 years old, in a white and blue dress from what appeared to be the late 1800s. And she kind of looked up, and she kind of gave me a little smile. And there had been weird stuff, going on. And I actually kind of heard like a little giggle, and the air got really cold, and so it was really bizarre. And I really had to think about that one, because I clearly saw it, and I was in my late 20s at this point. So, it wasn't just a matter of, I don't know, just some weird stuff on that. So, and then it turns out, did some background research, and it turns out that there had been a girl about that age in 1902, something like that, who had died in a house fire there. The house had caught on fire, and she died of smoke inhalation. Weird stuff. I don't know, man. The short answer to all this stuff is, I don't know. I just don't claim to know. I'm curious, and I'm fascinated by it. I lean kind of toward one way than another in many of it. Again, largely because of my experiences. But when it comes to saying I know for sure, I don't know for sure. It just, again, when it comes to reincarnation, I just think that my take on it is probably not, but I just don't know. I mean, I don't know for sure, and I would be remiss to say that I know, because I don't know. I don't think it's necessary for what I see, and in some ways I don't see it serving a purpose to suffer again, because it is, this world is much about suffering, and it would seem like you'd get it, I don't know, out of the way. It certainly is a gift, and don't get me wrong, there's the gift of life, which is remarkable. But there's also a certain, I don't know, a taste to it. At least there is now. I mean, my experience now is based on, living from the late 1960s until now. And so it's tainted, or at least it's colored by that experience. And that experience has left a taste in my mouth that, man, I don't like it, right? I sense it for what it used to be, perhaps. It looks like perfection broken. There's a beautiful world with beautiful creations in it, but so much darkness and poison poured into it that just leaves that taste in your mouth. I don't think I'd want to do it more than once. It's death, not merely casting off the mortal coil, as energy cannot be destroyed. Yeah, I mean, I think that we do continue. The consciousness does continue, but not in the. I think that we are a combination of physical and spiritual, and the spiritual continues, and that we were made to be eternal. But when things got broken, we no longer, are. That we do die. And this would be the point, I think, of going back. If we look again at the beginning of chapter 6, take a look here again, where it says that, let me change the version here from the Message to, I go to the American Standard. God saw that let's see, here he says, my spirit will not strive with man forever, for he is also flesh, but his days will be 120 years. And he saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was on only evil continually. And it repenteth Jehovah that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And that's pain, right? It hurt him so badly, what had happened to his children. So to that, I don't see it. But again, I absolutely, like most things, I reserve the right to be completely wrong. So yeah, I mean, again, my point is not to argue or contend about it. Simply, like, that's how I see it, and I will leave it to you to discover what you find. My encouragement always with these things is ask the Creator yourself, right? Ask them. I haven't gotten a good answer, but because it's not my business, it doesn't really affect my work here. But he may give you a different answer. He's been surprised. He's surprised me a lot of times. So always, in fact, I'm very surprised by the nature and the things that they do. But it's remarkable to me how just amazing and beautiful they are. The most unbelievably cool, beautiful, loving, powerful, patient. I don't have the words. It's ineffable. But I do love them. They're beautiful to me. Jam, my brother sat with the Naga in India and saw the reptilian eyes of one. Interesting. Take on psychedelics. I love drugs. No, I was kidding. As with all things, I think I trust the Creator more than I trust man. So I think the natural versions are probably healthier. But I think all things were put here for a purpose. And I do find it interesting that the things, those type of things that would allow us to see around the corner or to see through the veil are again, poo-pooed and pushed off as bad. Somehow that's a moral turpitude of some kind, that you would use those things. And so again, the fact that the nature of the people who are saying that, again, I think that their entire purpose is to hide that there is something behind it. Certainly we saw with the government's experiments of the for example, LSD in the 1960s and 50s and 60s. And I've seen some video clips, like direct film, of those people who were they were testing on. And pretty much to a person, they all had an experience of understanding the interconnectedness of all things, that there was a spiritual nature to life, that there was more to it. Many of them saw, again, beings, and most of them in the right setting, when not being tortured, had a good experience, and some, again, found it life-changing, life-altering, that they never did, again, see things the same way. And so, certainly with that information, you'd think that those who care about mankind would want to share that. But instead, they made it, again, highly illegal, and put you into prison for a very long time just for having a little bit of something that might allow you to peer into another world. And whether that's LSD, or whether that's psilocybin mushrooms, or peyote, or again, anything natural, ayahuasca, and they've outlawed it. Right. So what does that tell you? That just like everything else, they're afraid of its results. Even smoking, right? So I find they've turned that into something bad. According to all the Native Americans, it was a gift given by the Creator to allow a calming way to connect. Right. It was smoking the peace pipe was a thing that they did to reflect and to connect to the Creator. And they've taken it and turned it into something that's addictive, cancerous, and now, pariah. So they've turned it into something like all things, right? Like sex is the most beautiful gift that we were ever given. And yet they turn it into something really abhorrent to mock the Creator. So, again, if you look at these things in context of the overview and how the world under the control of evil treats these things, then you can better see the nature of what they are. So when they begin to treat them with hostility, maybe have a look. My take on it. Other questions, comments? Don't want to go too long here. Already an hour in, but I want to cover, again, anything that makes sense. Do I think there's a hard line between living things and non-living things? Well, between alive things and dead things, yes. But by non-living things, if you just mean material things like rocks and trees or stuff, those are living. Even, but rocks, I think I think they're sentient and alive to some degree, in some way that we don't quite understand. I think the Earth itself is probably a living system and conscious. I think the luminaries are likely sentient and conscious. Most of the ancient cultures appear to see it that way. They seem to know a lot more than we do. So I'd say they know more than I do. So I'll take their cue and say probably there is. So I even in my research with water, it seems to show an intelligence and a sentience. It's water. What is that, man? So a hard line. No, I don't. I think that all things have life. Yeah, all aspects of nature breathe with the Father. That's how I see it. I think that everything is made with life in it, and all around us. Rocks have consciousness. I think so. I think they do have a kind of sentience to them, and I think there is a collective sort of sentience around us. And some people think that is God. I think that's sort of like one of the spirits of God. Again, in the book of Revelation, it describes the 7 spirits of God that go forth into all the earth. I think that's probably pretty close. Again, these are my thoughts. I don't know. I don't know these answers for certain. But these are my thoughts of what I've seen. This is how I observe it. Other things? Well, I'm drinking water. Need to drink more water. I'm doing that as I try to quit smoking. I do end up, I find, my wife kind of gets on me. I end up smoking more when I talk. So, frankly, I talk to you guys more than any other time. I spend more time, I talk way more during these streams than I do at any other time during the week. I'm actually very quiet most of the other time. I've said before that those who I work with would be shocked at how prolific and vociferous I can be during these streams when I am I go the whole week at work and not say 10 words, pretty much. Just do my thing. Anyway, anything else, guys? We're at about an hour in, and I just kind of wanted to, again, kind of recap where we were last time. Next time with Wayne, we're going to do, we'll take a look at Noah and the flood. I think, I mean, he may want to touch back on this. Could I elaborate on the nature of, jinn and demons? I think jinn are pretty much the same as, I think that's just a different way to name it from the Middle East, that they are beings made out of some, fire, wind. I think that's, I think there's some are angels, right? They had good and bad. That's just a different name for them, and a different tradition of experiencing them. I think it's pretty much the same set, right? There are there are different kinds of angels. There's all sorts of them described as some of them being fiery, some of them being of different aspects. And I think that having them of different aspects of the elements, wind and fire and water and stuff is probably likely. I think that's probably all part and parcel of the same thing. I don't think there's any difference really other than the name, and the stories about them are probably a little more clear within that tradition because they didn't get gobbled up and thrown away like the Catholic Church did with most of Western Europe, which is most of Western history, right? So the fact that different, Middle Eastern history didn't get quite as run over, and they got to keep some of the traditions, so we have a little bit clearer view. I think there was a lot of stuff that was tossed away, stories of, stuff that's been pushed off into mythology with dragons and giants and unicorns and all that sort of stuff that they all thought, all the stories indicate were very real. Infusing water with the healing vibrations of 528. Oh, yeah. No, that'd be awesome. Absolutely. God, that's a great idea. I try to put intention into it because, again, water is one of the sources of life. Without sun and water, you cannot have life, insofar as the world that I know. When I make coffee, I absolutely put intention into the water while it's being made. I do the same with food and cooking. Water is a source of life, and they damage it as much as they can. And water contains a memory of all that's happened to it. So if you can infuse it with positive before you consume it, and again, humans are between 60 and 85% water, depending on your age and your body makeup and your gender and that sort of stuff. But they're mostly water, and it's required to pass all the little chemical circumstance, all the chemical signals back and forth. So absolutely, anything that you can do, I think that's a terrific idea, is to infuse it with any source of positivity that you can. And the healing vibrations of 532 or 528 or 432 or any of those good ones, yes, absolutely. I would put it, put it in front of, some good music or meditation or anything like that would be a positive. It would be better. Going along with the article you and Red Fox covered about the brain being a receiver or tuner. Or at least tuning it to a different channel. Maybe not fine tuning, I don't know if I want to be in that state always, but tuning to a different channel for a while, yes. And once you realize that you can receive it, I think that for many people you can kind of get there without the constant need for constantly being in that state. I think, again, if our culture were different and we had more of the Native American thing with shamans and, maybe it would be good for somebody to be kind of just high all the time in a cave and people go to for advice. I don't know, man. Certainly, what we know is that the nature of what's around us and the culture that surrounds us now. And so we just kind of try to make our way through the world, I suppose, as best we can. I've tried to think of how to envision a better world, and my wife and I have often discussed how to better make the world a better place. And we quickly came to the idea that it's not fixed or it's not broken; it's fixed. Right? It cannot be fixed within its current system. The system is designed to do exactly what it's doing, which is to allow power to run from the top, from those who are behind the scenes, and to go through basically a play. It's a show, and to get people to look at the show, it's bread and circuses, right? So that is how it works. You would have to go to a completely different system, much like I know more probably about the Native American culture than most others in terms of how it operated, at least in something that I would say probably works well. I'm sure there are other native cultures that are more tribal in nature that operate in a similar way, but that seems to me to be the best way to approach it is a tribal family sort of thing that shouldn't get past about 500. That's about the number of neural networks that you can manage in terms of relationship. Is 300 is better, but 500 is about the limit, and then thereafter you should split off and start another group. It worked because when you get more people together, that means implicitly more power to wield, and then that means somebody wants to wield it, and that means compromise, and that means bad things happen. Yeah, right. A sneak peek. Absolutely. I don't know. Every day would be like, whoa. All right, guys. Anything else for me? I'm not gonna. I don't want to shoo you off because I love the times that again I spend with you guys, and it is a delight for me. And again, I'm willing to cover pretty much anything. There are places, of course, that I do get maybe a little bit uncomfortable because I don't want to tweak anybody, right? It's like I know I'll see things different, and I just try to explain things as best I can from how I see them. So. That's it. Let's see, the brain being predominantly emulsified fat. Yes, minerals, crystals certainly indicates our brain as an intent. Yeah, I mean, it operates that way. It is fatty, for sure. Well, no, hey, Raven, well, thank you for coming. I mean, again, I do this as a gift to the community because this is a great group of people, and anything I can do to be a part of that and to help is, again, it's an honor for me to be involved and to share these things with you guys. And again, I've spent quite a bit of time in studying contemplation and trying to know the Creator better. As I've gone around in circles and gone from both very far away from the Creator and very earlier in my life, I definitely went deep down the dark rabbit hole, and it's created, it created problems for a long time. But it also gave me at least a perspective of saying, I advise against it. I don't think anybody who's ever gone down that way really ultimately is happy that they did. Ultimately, how do I discern between science that represents real things and that which exists to deceive or to take credit for the actions of the Creator? Yeah. Well, discernment, is always a thing. I would just say that there is, no, dark glasses, Woody, I appreciate the question. Yeah, it's a kind of difficult to answer because, I mean, I think you already probably are aware that most of the things as they're described are misdescribed, right? And so then it's incumbent upon us to dig deep and to find what's the truth and to separate the truth from the lies. And that therein kind of comes the challenge. And it's also a frustration for me because I don't have, I don't have a lab to work out of. I have to kind of go on some data from other people, and I have to look at what they're saying and the setup that they're using and what they're trying to do. And so as I look at scientific research and that sort of thing, I find some of it just to be pure poppycock. It's just nonsense. Some of it to be certainly valid in terms of they're using natural laws. And again, the difference between natural laws and the scientific method is that natural laws can explain what we observe, and those things hold true. Like the second law of thermodynamics is entropy, right? These natural laws, these are the way things appear all the time, versus scientifically validated, right? Which is the empirical process of cause and effect. This causes this. And so that helps us better understand the world. But now what's happened is all that's been hijacked, and so they take now a view that says that they just hypothesize or pull something out of their ass and say, oh yeah, we're scientists, so it's scientific. No, it doesn't. It doesn't work that way. Certainly anything to do with from my perspective, to do with outer space or anything like that, just is empirically impossible. Just the way that they described it is impossible. When it comes to, again, even for example, chemistry, which is fairly valid, and I've done all kinds of chemistry experiments, and I know about how to use catalysts and how to use Avogadro's constant and to figure these things out in advance, and using the covalent bonds and that sort of stuff. But I've come to the conclusion that is probably, again, a misdescription, and it's probably better described as frequency and vibration, and that they are not material solids, but they are a frequency which is a cohesive frequency. When it becomes coherent, appears or becomes solid in a sense that we recognize it that way. And even, for example, water is not strictly like H2O. It's not two atoms of hydrogen and one of oxygen. It doesn't work that way. So it is related to those elements, hydrogen and oxygen, because when you break them down to break the cohesive nature of the pattern of water, then you can get hydrogen and oxygen out of it. But because you've broken down the cohesiveness, and so then it takes the next cohesive form, and that would be those other things. So thanks, Rethink. Yeah. So anyway, I look at it in terms of it's just like, I assume that everything that they tell me is a misdescription. I'm suspect of everything. And then thereafter, if I want to know, I have to start digging deep into it and better understand and learn for myself, the processes involved, and read the abstracts and go through it and try to understand the material sciences behind it. And so there are some, again, material sciences that are certainly valid, but most of the conclusions that they bring ultimately are misdescriptions, because if I go into almost any abstract, what I ultimately find is that eventually we get to this place where it says, in a process we don't yet fully understand. Well, that describes pretty much everything. They don't understand really why anything. And that's the thing about natural law, is that we can describe what happens. We just don't know why. We don't know why entropy occurs. We can describe how it does. We don't know why electricity and magnetism occur. We can make it happen, right? We can induce it through some behaviors, but it's because it already exists. It's there. We don't make it. It's there, and there are processes, and it works the same. There are laws, and the universe follows these laws, and so that's how it works. So how do you discern? Develop discern. I mean, I know it's a stupid, it sounds like a crappy answer, but I now start with the assumption that I'm skeptical of everything, and then I have to kind of work out from that. I assume that there's probably some validity, some truth in it, but also that it's a misdescription and they are lying, and so then I have to tease apart the nature of the lie versus what is true. So that's how I approach it. All right, guys. With that, I'm going to go spend some time with my lovely bride. I have a few things left to do this evening. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. And again, I know it wasn't probably as exciting as maybe some of them are. It's great when Wayne is here, but I do want to just keep this spot open so you guys can drop in if you like. We'll spend a little more time. I'll noodle on the way out, again, thanks so much for joining me, and join Rose and I, if you don't mind, 6 o'clock a.m. in the Pacific time, Tuesday and Thursday, and then I'll be back with Secrets of Saturn on Wednesday evenings, and that's on Secrets of Saturn channel, and Poppycock Report is on Rose 777 channel, and then I'm back next Saturday with more of Unintended Consequences. So thanks again.